section 47, and then you start looking at care proceedings. Is that what comes out of the conference? Can you do
care proceedings are very. We can start care proceedings in the referral and assessment team.
Right,
If you know, we wouldn't wait. Although courts are now very clear, if a child's not on child protection plan, then there's clearly no need to remove immediately. We're having a real problem with judges at the moment, who are very parent-led, and who, rightly, on some level, because it does mean that you don't have social workers going in and stealing children, as the papers say we always do, but it does mean that children have to suffer a huge amount of harm, particularly with domestic violence and neglect cases, before we get them back. So we can instigate, the whole care proceedings process has changed hugely now. We now need to have consultation meetings with solicitors and parents before we even go down the court route to give them a plan of action, and it's called the public law outline. It's incredibly complicated, and I don't understand it, and I've been doing the job a long time. But basically, if I have a concern and I'm thinking that actually at some point I really need to get these children out, I go to our legal department set up a meeting with the parents and their solicitors, and at that point they're entitled to completely free representation, legal representation, regardless of what they earn. And you sit in a room and you draw a plan, and it's generally very tight, about 6 weeks. If you as parents don't do this, then we will instigate care proceedings. And actually it has really reduced the numbers of cases going into court. Because at that point when you introduce legal is the point that parents usually realise that we're really serious about it. And I have to say it's been a massive cost-saving exercise, because to instigate proceedings, a set of care proceedings for a child is in the region of £50,000 to £100,000 a child. And once you're in, that's it, and that's for a fairly straightforward case. Whereas if we go through the initial public law outline stages, it's minimal costs. So, and you know, in theory, it's better outcomes for children.
Are you finding that those that have been through the courts, because of child protection concerns, they're being placed with other family members rather than foster carers? Because obviously they close Little Cove, which is where I used to work. So it's just where are they going now if you haven't got
and the thing is, to avoid going to court, we are trying to get parental consent to place children with white family members. It's far better. That is much more difficult when there are issues around contact, or if we have a parent that's a sex offender or something who wants access to their child, and a grandparent is saying, "It's my son. How do I stop my son seeing?" Then we have to consider actually whether it's in the best interest of the child. But we will always place children with family before we ever even look at foster care. What we wouldn't do is we wouldn't find some long lost auntie that this child doesn't know. It needs to be someone that the child feels comfortable with, particularly if they're at age, they're kind of 18 months and up, where they're able to recognise people. It's not so much an issue with small babies, but always family based.
And what percentage that go to conference would be removed in some way?
I have absolutely no idea, but it's very small.
Very small.
We remove very few children. I haven't removed a child for nearly 2 years. And as a senior practitioner, I have the top end of cases. The other thing that is much more prevalent now is that we used to be granted emergency protection orders through courts. Judges now won't do them either without parental consent, which kind of is ridiculous. So what we have to do, and it's to do with it, because what we used to do is we would go to court without the parents' knowledge. That was kind of the whole point. But they now want parents represented properly. Darling Human Rights Act. And in some cases, okay, I will agree with it, but actually the whole point that I'm there is that I don't want to give these parents notice that I'm about to go and do this. So what we have to do now is we need to talk to our lovely colleagues at the police and say, please take police protection, because the police can do that. And that then gets the children out. We then have 72 hours for us to then go to court and say, look, they're out now. And we kind of do it a bit back to front and manipulate the system. But it's, I mean, I work for the out-of-hours service. Actually, that's not true, I haven't. But that was on the out-of-hours service. In my day-to-day job, it's very rare. Very rare. And I have to say, more often than not, we can say to a parent, I don't know, a mum with postnatal depression, or who's really not managing the children, we can say, why don't you let grandma have them? For a couple of weeks, we'll put some support in for you, whatever, we'll get you back on your feet. And actually, that is what social work's about. It's about keeping families together. And often when a parent realises that I'm not this big stick-wielding person who's going to take the children away, that actually we just place kids with grandma for a couple of weeks, get some intensive support for you, then literally you can come home and then I can go away. And that's it. And when they realise that actually that's why we're there, it makes for a much better working relationship. So.
Okay, just one last thing from me. I find it hugely frustrating that when we have initial contacts with them, when we first face them, their biggest fear is social services. Okay. You know, how do you deal with that? Do you not think? I think there should be some sort of massive media campaign to educate people.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people they are told by, especially if English isn't their first language, they're told if you tell anybody they take your children away.
Yeah.
But does it not infuriate you that, you know, all the good work you're doing is being undermined, you know, because people are not educated to what you do? And how do we get that across?
Do you know what? I don't know because every professional that I work with tries to do it. Health visitors, school nurses, whoever tries to say,
we do it too.
We do.
You know this. All I can do is when I go out to a family, I will sit down and I will be very clear with them and their children about what my job is, and that my first and foremost, my job is to keep you together. Now, I certainly would say to small, but I will say to parents, particularly if it's a very desperate situation, actually you do know that at some point I'll be assessing this under child protection. But this is my 11th year with County, and in all that time, I've just said to people, I will always be fair with you and I will always be honest with you, and I've not once had a problem. And I think if you're straight with people, but that's all you can do. That's all I can do is make so that the people I know, and we do have nice roads where there is a social worker for every single house. And then so somebody at number 1 will say, oh, we've had this really good social worker, and actually, she told us we had to clean the house, but we've done it and it's fine. And then the word spreads. And then eventually you do get a culture of actually not all social workers are like that.
I think the problem is that the media actually enjoy saying that social workers are ogres and that's what they're actually doing.
And we will never win. We will never win. We're either child snatchers or we left them in there to die. There is no middle ground. And you kind of accept that when you go into child protection social work. You know, I still am getting, why aren't you out there talking to parents like those of baby P, because if he had then he'd have lived. And my answer is that actually social workers don't kill children, parents do. And that normally shuts them up.
Absolutely.
If you're able to say that in actual fact, you know, the reason why the Children and Young People's Service will be, you know, maybe asked to assist is because you need help, your children are at risk, and what they're wanting to do is make sure that you and your children are safe, so it's better to work with them because they want to help you. It's not about taking your children away. And some people, if you say that to them, then they do change.
I don't think they believe you half the time, and it takes a huge amount of time. It takes a huge amount of time.
I think as well, in the environment we're looking at, if you want to control somebody, the best thing to do is say, if you tell them about what our relationship, then they'll take the kids away. So you're fighting against that as well.
And particularly as we're dealing with more and more families who are English as their first language. And there's a very, within our, certainly locally to me, our Eastern European community, very close indeed. And having now spent some time with some Polish families, specifically Poland, their social services system really is Eastern Bloc. You know, their adoption, I was amazed when I dealt with a mum who was trying to give up her baby at the hospital, who couldn't understand why she couldn't just give me the baby. And actually, because in Poland she'd given up her previous child and she went to effectively county hall and signed a form and walked out, and that was it. Her child had gone. And it is that antiquated in Poland still that, you know, within their communities here, of course, they don't see that, you know, with these lovely touchy-feely people who are there, you know, who are actually there to keep them together.
Can I ask one other question? We're running out of time. When we first started up Worth, I think there was an assumption that we would send every domestic, like the police do, send you every case. And we made a decision that we weren't going to do that because we wanted to be supportive to the non-abusing parent and that would be the best way to try and stop the abuse within the child's life. So the police are still doing that, obviously, with the 600 referrals.
The police send us, you know, if Johnny, age 15, nicks a bike, we get a referral about it. It's got nothing to do with us, it's an ongoing battle with the
police. So there's no screening going on?
No, if there's a child, and we sometimes get, you know, if 10 teenagers have been picked up shouting at somebody on Worthing Prom, will get a referral, every single one of them.
Right.
So that's 10 contacts that
And do you have to go through all of those? Do you have to go
Every single one of them has got a 10-page process that has to be done for each child. And it means they then have a social care record, and this is our argument, nothing to do
Why
with
should
us.
they be on a social care record?
Exactly.
So I think our dilemma as an adult service is like, so obviously there's a clear process for section 17 and 47, but where it doesn't fall within that remit, you know, the dilemma is really we should be working with the children more. Because we're learning today about the full impact, even if the child is not present, even if it doesn't even reach a section 17, and that sounds like the criteria is quite high to reach a section 17 around domestic violence. So I think the issue for our service at the moment is we're kind of increasing our understanding of the effects of children, we're increasing our understanding about how limited the, you know, obviously when it kicks in quite high that's good, but we've got a big gap in
Massive gap.
this, and so, you know, are there any sort of pathways that have been identified if you get a phone call at CAP that is under section 17 domestic violence? Are there any clear pathways in place? I mean, would it be going through to the CYP forum or?
Bear in mind I haven't started on CAP, I don't start on next week, so I don't know what their process are. I'm here as a kind of referring assessment. All I do know is that the services that we used to have in place through the NSPCC and through the NARDOs are no longer there.
Right.
There is a massive gap in service, and it isn't one that will be plugged by us.
No.
And we don't have the expertise or the resources really. And we are left with CAMs. Which is disastrous.
Is tremendous.
And it's a real criteria, it's quite high.
Because I think that's the dilemma, because we're kind of understanding that we need to be asking these questions, but actually, is it safe to ask these questions if you've got nowhere to refer to?
I mean, I think my understanding is that if they are in that very grey patch between absolutely no and you would refer anyway and on the borderline, that there's this new thing that's called CAP Plus, just for another layer in it. There was CAP and now there's CAP Plus, which is going to be managed by assistant social workers who were working with me up until last, and they've moved them all out and moved them all into CAP Plus, which is great because assistant social workers might not have a nice bit of paper, but they are at least as skilled as most social workers I know. So they've got huge amounts of social care background, and they're doing all their training about because we don't hear about services that are non-statutory.
No.
We just don't get the information, and every now and again I'll come to Marek or something like that, and someone will say, "Have you heard? You know, shall we try this?" I have no idea what they're talking about. We just don't. There's so much out there. So I think the aim is that at the CAF Plus level, they will have that knowledge of all those non-statutory agencies, but whether there is a service, DV service for children, there's a huge gap.
And would the CAF Plus officers actually initiate the CAF form if we fail?
They are likely to lead it.
Right.
They will certainly I think if there isn't actually a lower level social care role, they may sit in at the beginning for the first couple of meetings just to kind of guide things, and then they'll let it. If there's an identified lower social care role, then they'll stay involved, and I guess be the lead professional.
Okay.
Thank you, that was in line then. That was fantastic. Thank you very much. Has everyone got what they... So can I just ask, are you not going to do Marek anymore?
No, Marek is all mine.
Yay!
So you'll have me all the time now, as opposed to just as and when
I was a bit concerned that with this new role that you wouldn't be involved in Marek anymore.
I get all the stuff Marek's mine.
That's brilliant. Jenny, thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving up your time, especially it's your last day with your team.
Oh, it's not. I finished yesterday.
Oh, did you?
It's my day off.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
In 22nd? Something like that. 20 something like that. Yeah, nice to see you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. I think that was quite good, wasn't it? And what I'm hoping is CAP will do for us, and I'm loads of there's something we've got to work out. What I want to do is stop putting those referrals in to cover our backs. Because that is a huge amount of their work. It doesn't even reach